basically I'm more in Azure. My partner Daniel here, he's actually more of the SaaS and Amazon, Google, that type of space. So.
Yeah, we founded Spherium right before pandemic. So a lot of focus shifted to remote and kind of stayed there. Because a lot of companies, even after pandemic, obviously shifted their focus and accelerated cloud transformation. That word is being used everywhere right now. But a lot of companies, an example we'll show you guys today, a company in Texas, our client, they became our client during pandemic and stayed, and we'll tell you why, why they even came to us to begin with. So it's interesting to see how everybody kind of ran remote. Now they stayed remote, slowly coming out, but everything from budgeting plans to IT transformation kind of accelerated. So that kind of really helped us get small to medium, even some large size companies, which was interesting to see. So, Alex, I don't know if you want to talk about the agenda.
Sure. So basically what we do, we're involved in a few different things. I mean, again, like each one of those bullet points is a career by itself, right? So we're going to touch, like very briefly on things. So we're about actually first and foremost gain visibility into your environment, right? Because a lot of folks, they move into the cloud spaces. There's a lot of functionality things, but once you're in the cloud, you're really basically losing this legacy protection, right? You're no longer behind the firewall. The data is out in the cloud, basically that means I can access it from anywhere. And what you don't know can hurt you, so we're basically trying to, the first thing we do is we're trying to make sure the clients have the tools actually to see what's happening, right? So basically we are protecting and governing the endpoints, which is ultra important. I'm going to get to this in a little bit, right? Because these days actually devices are kind of like your lay in the sand. So there's no firewall, but the way you basically treat security things is actually a company device versus your personal device, right? And we basically do a lot of that. Discover the dark data. We'll talk about this. Basically, again, data is out in the cloud. I can access from anywhere. It may be confidential data. It may be the data that potentially can basically get in the way of your compliance, such as HIPAA, such as GDPR or any other compliance. And we basically we're about giving a single source of identity, and we'll get to this basically once we talk about the use cases.
Yeah, and as Alex was mentioning, I think we started, as I told you guys, in 2020. That's where we saw a huge jump in cybersecurity crimes, specifically because people were just susceptible to being at home using your kids' laptops. We have a lot of meetings when people would join from their daughters' Google accounts just because they forgot to switch it. So everything was really open, and it kind of trajectory stayed on that level. A lot of companies rush to, and company in example will show you, to protect themselves, but sometimes it's a little bit too late. And they're expecting this to kind of grow and grow up to 2027, the slide that we kind of pulled up. And then various, obviously, hijacking attempts, hacking, data breach, ransomware, which we'll talk today, and various other attacks. So the company, Alex, I'll hand it over to you, but we had a company from Texas. It's a medical device company that came to us in, right, during the pandemic.
It's right around, actually. I mean, we're talking about the migration, but something happened that.
And they jumped to Office 365 quickly because they had to, because everything was remote, and have not really realized all the controls, and they had a pretty significant kind of a ransomware attack, which they brought us after to kind of secure the environment. So Alex, I don't know if you want to talk more.
Sure, yeah. So the typical basic problem that a lot of companies are missing, they are moving data in the cloud too quickly. Basically, they're without actually having any governing or any restrictions or any protection, basically any control plane around this, right? So, and basically they rely on outdated security models, right? So, especially the companies that actually have been around for a bit, they actually have the CISOs of the old school, right? So they think, okay, how do we make us more secure? Let's get more firewalls, like let's get better firewalls. But they're not really prepared, but basically the whole warfare changed, right? Because you're no longer, the hackers are no longer trying to get behind the firewall. They're trying to get to the data that's up in the cloud, right? So the game is very different. A lot of companies actually have this. They have separate set of credentials, right? So for instance, they have credentials that they log into the laptop, basically, and get the emails and so forth. Also, for instance, they sign up for cloud platform such as Salesforce, Oracle, and so forth. They don't integrate. There's a separate set of credentials, right? I mean, basically, integration is very easy, but there are still companies out there where an average person basically has 5 different accounts or 3 different accounts, right? Big problem. Basically means if I hire somebody, I have to create 5 different accounts. The big problem is let go. I have to make sure that I have the whole step procedures that I need to do to cancel every single one account, right? So, separate credentials. Another thing is actually corporate and BYOD. So a lot of companies actually welcome using personal devices these days, which BYOD stands for bring your own device, right? Because this comes actually with trouble, right? So for instance, if I'm allowing you to use your personal computer and I terminate the relationship, like what's the confidence that there is no corporate data is actually left on my laptop, right? That's a big deal. Same as my phone and so forth. So there is a big, gap in device management. Excessive rights. So, I mean, this particular company actually, they like to use consultants. Consultants come in, they ask the elevated rights, right? So, for instance, 20 accounts, they all ask for high privileges. Turns out half of them did not even show up, right? So, account was out there, it's stale, it's never used. It has a high privileges, right? And this is the hacker's best dream, because I mean, their stale account, they can basically throw different passwords against it all day. Nobody will notice, right? And dark data. So people basically exchanging the data, they email in, they are placing things in the SharePoint with external links, with the links from outside of the company, with links to competing companies and so forth. And there's still no confidence what's out there, like. And a lot of auditors, when they do insurance, when they're doing compliance, they want to know how is this kind of data is actually being protected and handled, right? So it needs to be visibility.
Yeah, as Alex mentioned, they essentially brought us in. The previous slide showed what they had, but they brought us in after it actually happened to kind of work with the IT staff, train the IT staff, and help them get out of that current situation. We didn't help them fix the ransomware, but we came after to re-secure the environment to make sure it doesn't happen again. And consequences, as Alex mentioned, was pretty apparent because they didn't have any controls. So it was pretty easy for the hacker to get in and kind of take control of the systems. So we were basically on a post-mortem of the situation, so we didn't see all the but it was still interesting to see how they approached and how they trained their staff going forward. So, and I'll go to the next slide.
That's awesome.
That's
That was me before pandemic, by the way.
Yeah.
All right, so the first thing we did was basically collapse the identity because there were so many identities around, right? There's no accountability. So like each person would have like 5 different accounts. A lot of these people were let go or basically terminated a long time ago, still as active accounts, still as active systems. So the first thing to do is basically collapse in one place, integrate everything, and do the scan to make sure that basically that all elevated and regular accounts are all accounted for. Another thing is actually, that's what we did. We disabled legacy authentication. I'll talk more about it. So legacy authentication, to give you guys a short version, is basically something that uses your username and a password. So, but those are easily, they've been stolen. People use simple stuff. Therefore, another thing is the MFA, multi-factor authentication, right? So, but they're still out there, basically, tenants and the programs that don't support this, almost modern, and they only support legacy. So we work with them to make sure that legacy stuff is away and everything is actually out there that is capable to support the secondary factor, right? We did a lot of work with PIM, Privileged Identity Management, and I'll talk more about this. We implemented device management. I'm going to talk about this. It's called the tool formerly known as Intune. Now it's actually a different name, is Endpoint Manager. And we did, we actually introduced the different levels of security, the different levels of lockdown of the machines, and I'll talk more about it in the previous slides. One more, sorry. And you know, it's typically as we do, we own the business, we teach them and train them, make sure that actually they have enough knowledge to kind of like run with it by themselves, not needing us. So.
Yeah, and a lot of our clients right now love this model. They call hands-off keyboard. We actually don't do a lot of implementation. We kind of guide them and drive them. So it's an interesting model. So on one hand, it's a little bit frustrating because you can't really do implementation yourself, but it really feels you empowering them to do more later. And so it helps us, helps them, and you can see actually they benefiting from every session. So in the beginning, we thought there was a bit of an awkward way to kind of implement something because it might take longer, but it takes time. But you get larger benefits for them being able to support it themselves, which that's the end game anyway.
Alright, so let's look about basic identity thing is like once you actually collapse everything into Azure AD, there are several things. First of all, one account for everything, right? So if I need to onboard somebody, I just create one account, right? Most importantly, if I need to let go somebody, right, I only terminate one account right there. I know that the person is completely cut off the system, right? So easy integration with everything else. So basically, Azure AD is actually easily integratable with most of the applications just available in the store. It's a few clicks. Some applications require a little bit more work. Also, it does real-time risk analysis. Right? It takes a great time actually to learn my heuristics. Like for instance, if I'm the salesman who travels around the world, for me it's normal actually to be logging in from Boston, next day in San Francisco, next day in basically because I'm traveling, right? If I'm a receptionist that basically just walks in at 9 a.m., always from the same place, all of a sudden there's a travel, that's unusual logging, right? So basically using machine learning, using this kind of like observation, it determines the real-time risk level. And another thing is actually, once again, I'm cherry picking this, there's a lot more to it. So keep you guys in mind. Custom ban password. So basically we create a list of all of the passwords with the name, basically today and so forth, just basically ban them so make sure that people don't use them. With spam, just enough, basically just enough and just in time. If I have an elevated rule, 90% of the time my account is actually a regular account, right? So if they steal my password, they just deal with a regular account. With spam, I go and I elevate myself up for an hour, for 3 hours, for as long as it takes me to complete the task, right? So really I'm vulnerable within those small attempts, right? So I'm greatly reducing the surface of attack. Big pain point is actually periodic reviews of elevated rules because a lot of companies they use consultants. Everybody's required high privileges. People leave. The sponsor forgets to inform the HR and so forth. There are lingering accounts everywhere, right? So there's automatic basically access reviews, and they give you suggestions. You can automate and say this person hasn't logged in 60 days. Well, let's automatically disable his account, right? He comes back, we can always re-enable him, right? Especially the contractors. And custom type the role evasions, I can say, for instance, if I'm the global admin, so if I got the keys to the kingdom, I have to do 2 hours at a time, right? After 2 hours, I turn the pumpkin, I'm going back to the regular account, right? So those are cool things there. So the next thing is actually a big deal is device management. So devices actually, they don't just stick to surfaces, laptops, and so forth. They're also mobile devices, right? They're also kiosk devices and so forth. So with device called basically with endpoint, I can tie all of your devices, whatever you use, your personal and your company devices. I can do remote wipe if this is your personal device and I basically separate it. I can do wipe of just corporate data and so forth. I'm also doing things that, for instance, this is a company computer. I marry this to a tenant. If the computer gets stolen, forgotten in an Uber or something like that, I do wipe, and basically the computer becomes completely useless unless you actually have the password for this tenant. So again, I'm cherry picking, but those are basically And password authentication, passwords suck because, I mean, people forget them. You tell them to do complex password, people start writing them down in sticker notes and so forth, so there's no win there, right? So we try to move people away from the password list using biometrics, right? And with the biometrics, the good thing is actually if I only get a token for this particular machine, so I can only use it to get in one particular machine, I can really not go around with the same token around the network, right? So I actually need to be sitting physically behind the machine to actually to get in, right? And with the endpoint is actually, it's all heuristic based on versus signatures. So that's the next one.
And another big point, IT right now, it's all remote. So Intune used to be called Intune, now it's called device management. It's so much easier, especially with Autopilot, which we did mention here, to issue devices to your employees, to remove devices from your employees, because you don't need actual IT staff in your building. And that was huge during the pandemic because everybody was remote, and you still need to give devices to your employees. So we had several projects on Intune during that time. So.
As a matter of fact, actually, I think the broke out balls actually the first real project for us was the MDM deployment.
The school in Chicago.
One of the big schools in Chicago, yeah. And EDR, endpoint detection response, which is basically the modern protection. So the idea is basically, I mean, if you're a small company, your IT guy is busy, you really don't have a SOC team, right? You really don't have anybody who's there watching things like 24/7, right? So we try to automate as many things as possible, right? So for instance, we can isolate the device in the network. Something funky goes on, we only create the tunnel so it only talks to the cloud, but nobody else in the network, right? We take a package and we detonate it. We basically detonate it in a virtualized space and see what it is, like walk at the first sight. If it's shady stuff, basically it gets the signature, and everybody else in the world, right, who connected to the system, they know about it. It's all done without user interaction, and basically we protect an all-round email, on-prem AD, Azure AD, and so forth. So basically across the bounds. And anything else that we can do, for instance, we basically can get our rights in Amazon Cloud, in Google, and so forth. Data is a big thing. So basically ability to classify the data, ability to identify personal data, financial data, and so forth. Once you identify, first you know about this, then you govern this, right? We work with data retention. With data retention, I mean, there are two things that clients care about. The first one is actually you want to make sure that you keep something for as long as they're legally obligated to. Some folks actually care more about not keeping something for more than they're legally obligated to because it becomes a liability, right? And another thing is actually we are discovering sensitive data threats. We got tools that goes out, scans your SharePoint, OneDrive, and anything that actually can talk to Azure, finds anything with the sensitive data, and once it does, it encrypts it. It can remove, for instance, somebody, it can remove the sharing from somebody who is not desired, and so forth. So it's all good stuff. It's all automated. I mean, so.
Yeah, and Microsoft Preview is kind of the new
name,
tool that kind of brings it all together.
They love changing the names.
Right. That allows you to do that, and that is there were other tools before. So.
And finally, we basically work with a tool called Sentinel, which gives you a single pane of glass. And this guy is actually, I mean, this is, you know, this tool's the disk because a lot of things are available like right off the box, and you basically get a single view across everything, right? So basically, devices, identities, messaging systems, automated incident responses. So for instance, basically we can also integrate it with ServiceNow, with any ticketing systems, right? Something shady happens, basically creates the ticket that basically assigns an investigation and so forth. It can go, for instance, and do, you know, with the Power Platforms, there is really nothing that this tool cannot do. And it doesn't just basically take care of Microsoft, it goes into Cisco system, AWS, Google, and so forth. Alright, so I mean, those are basically those are few things. So.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, there's so many tools both in Microsoft, in other AWS and Google. I'm sure you guys work with as well. it's giving client that path forward so they can actually little by little implement their cloud infrastructure and security. So.
And the biggest thing about this, I'm just going to list, the reason I got so attracted to those tools is it levels out the chances for the small guys, right? Because in the old days, the security was basically the hardware. You needed to get a certain piece of hardware to get a certain level of security, right? So the smaller companies will not be able to afford it, right? Here is actually, I mean, you can have a 10 people company which has the same security as, as an enterprise company. So that's basically, to me, was the big attraction point.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.